the news came down, of course, a couple days ago. Justin and myself went live, and Trev Alberts, in fact, did make that decision to move on to Texas A&M. So please catch the content that we provided here, the live stream. And wow, it still seems surreal to a certain extent that he would make that move. Again, it's means a little bit more when, and maybe hurts a little bit more to the fan base when it's a legacy guy, when it's an all-time great player and a guy that was off to such a great start as athletic director. Yeah. And, you ran down a number of theories as to what was going on. Did anything else come to light in regards to your sources, your connections about some of those theories?
No. And essentially what it boils down to is, there was an issue within the Board of Regents. That's still, nobody's refuting that. I think the biggest argument that I had, and I said this on yesterday's episode, was that the vitriol that was aimed towards Trev on Twitter, I think the Nebraska fan base could have weaponized that towards what would be for the betterment of the athletic department, and that is to go after the Board of Regents and use those platforms to really put the heat on those guys, because I think Trev having the target on his back for right now really takes some of the heat off of them. And, we can hate on Trev for the rest of our lives, but there's something that needs to be addressed right now, because there is a hole to fill, a couple, the president, athletic director, and the pieces need to be in place for those to, be good hires and for those to be sustainable hires, so we don't keep losing, fourth athletic director. And this will be our fourth athletic director in 13 years. And as I'll get into a little bit later with Matt Rule's comments on it, stability is important and retention is important. And when you're trying to build something, you need that. And like you said, it was emotion because of who he is. It was emotion because, Trev had the athletic department go in the right direction. We can't lose sight of that. He did do a lot of great things here. But the mechanism and how he went about leaving, that's what left a sour taste in my mouth and everybody else's mouth too, as well as, just kind of the tone-deaf tweeting he was doing, after A&M matched up with Nebraska in the men's and women's tournament. Go figure. He tweeted out about 4 times and deleted it and tweeted out again, just, congratulations to coach, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And it's just like, right now is not the time. It's too fresh. Just stay off Twitter for a little bit talking about the basketball game against A&M from the A&M side. So yeah, it was a difficult situation to navigate, because I understood everybody's frustration and I get why. It's hard to kind of remove the emotion out of those things, but just in trying to look at, what's better for the entirety of Nebraska, which is what we should be focused on, is the betterment of Nebraska moving forward, not externals. The way to do that is to focus on what we can control and try to, weaponize our fan base, because when our fan base is in unison attacking something, they can make some moves. We got a huge fan base on Twitter, and it's Rule mentioned it a little bit later, that with the expectations here, and if you listen to outside noise and stuff like that too, just the impact that the fan base has on certain things, that change will happen. You will get run out of town if they turn on you. So yeah, people can't take that lightly, how important that is to make sure that you air out your grievances as well with the Board of Regents, and not just on Twitter, and make sure you're calling, emailing, whatever. So I think that was my point on just in general with Trev Alberts. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think whoever fills in, and even Rule talked about, interim president Chris Kaborik, coming in there and really, connecting with him and the other coaches. And, he's been impressed with his professionalism, and even the governor reached out to him as well. So, he mentioned he has support from the top of the state, and, he likes who is in there filling in for right now. He thinks the people that are in place care for the student athletes, even though it's in an interim role, he wants somebody who's, cares about the kids. So I'm not sure that he will probably have somewhat of a say, hopefully, in the next athletic director, because he did kind of hint to some things a little bit later on in his press conference yesterday about what he wants in that. So yeah, it was never a money thing. Again, the money is about the same. I don't think necessarily that, A&M's not a better situation in my opinion. I don't think A&M's athletic department, I think overall, like Nebraska's brand new facilities, I just think Nebraska's in a better overall spot right now. But yeah, I don't know. That's my stance on it. And so I don't want to beat a dead horse with it. But yeah, I'm curious your outsider perspective.
Well, I was listening to all of that, but as soon as you mentioned all those missteps by Trev Alberts on Twitter, what do you think I did? I tweeted out our show, of course, but
Yep.
I am on the Trev Alberts
Oh,
X
oh,
page looking for what I can look. But as you mentioned, he deleted a lot of that stuff. But
yeah, he
man,
did.
he's probably reposted, I don't know, about 15, Texas A&M softball, baseball, basketball, everything possible here in the last 6 or 7 hours. But yeah, you would just think that would be a situation, especially with his alma mater involved. But even if that wasn't the case, it was just a dedicated fan base that you were leading, and then all of a sudden, virtually hours later, moments later, you are leading another program that is facing the previous program, your previous program that you would have been, full bore just hours earlier on their side,
Yep.
and they're set up in two of the highest profile events in college athletics. And it is a sensitive situation. Just lay low just for a couple days and let that go and not throw that out there. I think that would have been the best route to go. And for anyone who ever questioned whether there was more to the NCAA selections and the committee draw than just, hey, these all should be 1 seeds, those should all be 2 seeds, 3, and then however it plays out. No, they're looking for storylines, and this is one of the most obvious ones I've ever seen in my life.
100%. The fact that, we were all like, oh, of course this was happened when the men's dropped. And then about an hour later when the women's dropped, we're like, there's no possible way. Like, yeah, they have a sense of humor for sure. And it's one of those things where it's like Nebraska lined up as probably should have been a 7 seed, and they are the 8 seed, so they can match up with the 9 seed A&M. So, and then it's 6 versus 11 in the women's. So yeah, they knew what they were doing. And Rule kind of mentioned his issue with this is the fact that, the attention seems to be, and I don't know if I 100% agree with this, because he says the attention seems to be taken away. And he, in my opinion, this was a little subtle jab at Trev Alberts, because he was talking about, this became about the matchup with A&M more than it did the players. And he's like, that when you up and leave in the middle of the night, or, he made a quote about leaving in the middle of the night. And, he's like, it's just unfortunate that what the storyline of this game has gone from our players to this, because he thinks the players deserve the attention. And I still believe that the players want. I think they like this opportunity. When they showed them, when it was announced, they were smiling, laughing. They're like, okay. And then, so I think the players embrace it, and I think it's still going to be about the players. It's leading up to it. Yes, it'll be about the Trev Albert stuff, but when they're on the court, the people that are going to really capture the hearts of March Madness fans, it's not going to be the Texas A&M Nebraska game. It's going to be the Nebraska players, and if they can advance, it'll be about, the electricity and stuff like that of this kind of team, as opposed to, oh, they had to face A&M around 1. So I think to an extent he has a point, but I think for the most part, it'll always end up being about the players. I think the fans will make sure it's about the players for the most part. Like I said, the biggest thing is in the lead up, and then right after the game, I'm sure he'll take a lot of heat for sure. But yeah, I think the players will definitely get theirs, and I think they like this opportunity. I think it sets up perfectly for them, and just going to really suck if they drop the game. But
I did hear a good portion of Matt Rule's spring opening news conference the other day. And sometimes in those situations, I think the old school way to approach it would be just to ignore that anything happened. But of course, he wasn't going to do that. And he was very, very open about that happening and giving accolades and thanks to Trev Alberts, basically saying that he enjoyed working with him during that time. But of course, you have to deal with what the situation is, and you can't live in the past. You got to move on. The sport moves way too fast, and it's all about what's forward.
Yeah. And especially, like, you know, Rule has been very open and transparent this whole time. You know, it's not one of those things. He knew coming into this press conference that this was going to be something that was going to be asked about. So instead of just trying to dismiss it and be like, listen, you know, like, that's above my level. You know, I'm just here to coach the football team. He did sit there and answer some questions that I feel like people would have normally dismissed. And he is very transparent about it, because, you know, he even went into a little bit of what some of the things that he wants in the next athletic director could be, because he mentioned, you know, like a guy with unbelievable urgency, you know, because in the rapid changing college football landscape that we're in, you need to be able to adjust on the fly and adjust quickly. And so he wants people in there that can figure it out and work hard. You know, he wants a worker in there. Trev Alberts, he said, was there at 7:30 in a suit, you know, every morning. And he was a worker, and he was really good at figuring things out and navigating things and being ahead of the curve on certain things like the revenue distribution. And Matt Rule mentioned he was ahead of the game on that and had a plan for that. Somebody who's mentally strong, who doesn't hear like the outside noise. That was where he was talking about the outside noise in the fan base, that it's one of those things that if you listen to the outside noise, you're destined to fail, just because Nebraska fans are so passionate, you know, about the program and let our voices be heard. So, and somebody that's going to fight for the university. You know, he also mentioned, you know, about fighting for the university in certain details, you know, like with certain things with the Big Ten Conference, you know, just making sure that Nebraska is one of those schools that has a backbone and stands up for itself in certain aspects when it needs to. And that was also where he made the comment about someone who's not going to go quietly into the night. And so that was kind of like, I think the little he threw a little bit of good in there about Trev, but I think, you know, it was a surprise to him, he said. And so I think that he knows that there were some issues there, because he, quote unquote, said there was no major issues. And that is within the athletic department at, you know, his direct level. And so he did allude that there might be some issues in there. And so it's not like he completely dismissed it as nothing. He was surprised by it. He didn't have a whole lot of, you know, he was just kind of like, yeah, that happened. And, you know, it's time to, you know, he had dwelled on it for a second and then picked the pieces up and moved on. And, you know, he was actually, the biggest question of that day was, is Matt Rule going to stay? And, you know, that night he posted a video. It was the God Made a Farmer poem, and they dubbed it over to the Nebraska highlights, you know, and he posted that right after as just kind of like a cryptic way of saying, like, no, like, I'm here. And the importance of that video to him, that's deeper than even we think. There's a lot of method to his madness, but the importance of that video is, like, when he was trying to decide whether or not to come to Nebraska, he said Satterfield kept sending him that video. You know, there's different variations. Of course, it's not the Nebraska highlight one. You know, he said one of them's in like a Dodge Ram, you know, video or something like that. But the messaging stayed the same. And it was like, you know, God made a farmer, and it's about hard times. When times got tough, God made a farmer to come through, you know. And you know, he said that Satterfield kept sending that to him over and over. And that was kind of what Matt Rule felt was the ethos of Nebraska, and what led him to want to take over the university, because he can build that here. And that type of person is where you're going to find that person at the University of Nebraska, or in that area. And the way of life out there is what he wants to build his family and foundation of the program around. And so it was symbolic to him that he's, here for a purpose, and he wants to build and leave something that, in 20 years, they're looking back, on Matt Rule. And like he said, he wants to be able to walk in, not like Tom Osborne, but, be able to walk in when his career is over and people look at him and say, he did right by the university, and we were lucky to have him, similar to what we do with Osborne and Devaney. And, so it's one of those things where it's like he believes in everything about this. And he said everyone is all in on this, that no staff, coaches, anything from any of the teams have left. It's one of those things where it's like we're just going to keep moving forward. And the football program would be in shambles if the right guy wasn't in place to really have to deal with this, because I don't think people understand the negative effect this can have on a football team if you don't have a guy in place who's built to handle certain situations like this, who isn't built to answer these questions and stuff like this. Because he did say people were reaching out about his contract situation, so it's not always a situation where you're going to have a guy that's going to stand firm in his beliefs and stand firm where he is, because he knows this is the right place for him. And that's what Matt Rule is. He is going to stick this out because he committed to the University of Nebraska, and he committed to bringing his family here. He wants to raise his family here. He got his son in school. His wife opened a business. When I say here in Nebraska, his wife opened a business there. So they're there. That's where they're building from. And Matt Rule's here, and he says he's here for the long haul and continue to build. And that was the symbolism of that video. And so, a lot of the way Matt Rule operates is just, I don't think we need to worry about a lot of anything with him, because the way he operates is very much, he marches to the beat of his own drum, and he doesn't let outside influences or anything else change the way he operates.